everyone. Welcome to Cellular Healing TV. I'm Ashley Smith. Today's episode is one that will hit close to home with so many of you. We're discussing picky eating in children and what to do about it. It is more than just a nuisance. There is an actual psychology behind it that we can start to address. Our guest today is an expert on the topic, Jennifer Scribner. She is here to discuss the mindset traits of parents who successfully change their kids' eating habits, and she'll offer tips that you can try with your kids today. Jen is the author of the book, From Mac and Cheese to Veggies Please, How to Get Your Kid to Eat New Foods, End Picky Eating Forever, and Stay Sane in the Process. She's also a nutritional therapy practitioner, a restorative wellness practitioner, and a GAPS diet practitioner at Body Wisdom Nutrition. She teaches families how to make step-by-step changes to create a non-toxic lifestyle. Her focus includes food choices, non-toxic home products, and mindset and stress management tools, including EFT tapping. Today's episode is brought to you by CytoDetox. CytoDetox is a powerful detox supplement that can help you safely and naturally support your detoxification systems and flush away the toxins you encounter on a daily basis. All CHTV listeners can go to buycytonow.com to discover the science of CytoDetox and what makes it different from all the other detox products on the market. That's buycytonow.com for more information or to purchase. So let's get started and welcome Dr. Pompa and Jennifer Scribner to the show. This is Cellular Healing TV.
Welcome to the show, Jen. This is a show that we've had a lot of requests for. And the reason is because, my gosh, everybody has picky eaters in the house. I was going to say picky kids, but this could be adults too. So but anyways, welcome to Cellular Healing TV.
Thank you. Yeah, and you're right. I was a picky eater myself, still as an adult. So it's not just about kids. We often grow up and stay picky, and that's where the problems come in.
Well, I said at the top of the show, look, I wasn't a picky kid. I just didn't eat many vegetables. Said that kind of funny. I guess I was picky, right? But I was blessed to grow up with my mother's home cooking with every meal, and we ate better back then. Trust me, we did. But I still didn't gravitate towards vegetables. And then even as an adult today, I eat vegetables and even enjoy them really, but I still definitely, enjoy the fattier, foods, probably that I grew up with. I'd reach for nuts, meat over the vegetable, where my wife, on the other hand, is exactly opposite. It's funny, Jen, because when you look at our plates, I clear the fatty foods first, right? And then I'll start eating the vegetables. She goes after the vegetables. There's the meat, and she'll eat some of it. I get the rest type thing. But so I think a lot of it has to do with our childhood. But anyways, I want to start here. This is a big deal because obviously you, like myself and so many of the doctors watching, we work with, kids in particular that struggle to get the better foods in them. So you're the author of Mac and Cheese to Veggies. I love the title, by the way. So you've obviously developed some really good strategies that we're going to go through. But let me start here though. Why picky? Why do we have picky eaters? Why are we picky?
There's a lot of reasons for that. And there is a normal phase of picky eating. And I find that most parents, when, go through that and they think that their kids are just going through it as a phase. So let me define that normal phase first, which is between the ages of 2 to 4. And it might be the type of pickiness where you love green beans one day and you can't stand them the next day. And you get really into some things and then you dislike it, but there's still variation within the foods that you're eating, and you're open to trying new things at various times. So that's the norm for kids, and every kid's going to go through that. And when we're just giving our kids all whole foods, you can kind of run with that cycle, and they're still going to be making good choices in the course of a week or, whatever is appropriate.
Right.
Where we run into problems when it becomes chronic is when it goes beyond 2 years. And that is when we're still often holding on to hope with our 8-year-old, our 10-year-old, our teenagers that are highly picky and often limiting to food groups like carbohydrates in particular, and not having any veggies still. And a lot of it comes from the poor gut flora because our microbes can demand those carbohydrate foods. So that's what drives, I think, the majority of this type of picky eating. But there can also be structural issues within the mouth with where it's hard to chew, where kids like things of certain textures and really don't like others. And also there can be neurological issues or sensory processing issues where things don't taste or feel like we expect them to for our kids. And so they're having a different experience of food than we are.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, with that said, the microbiome, there's a physiological reason for it. I would expect so. And a psychological perspective here. I mean, like you said, I mean, even to the point of what we feel in our mouths. I mean, is there any other connections? Do they make any other psychological connections with it?
Yeah, sometimes there can, especially if there's sensory processing issues, or in the cases that I've worked with kids with autism, where, for example, one child had an aversion to eggs and he was nonverbal. And so his parents were, constantly trying to fight to get him to eat eggs. And later on, he recovered speech and he was able to explain to them that he didn't want the eggs because he saw the chickens that they had in the yard eating the bugs. So in his mind, eggs were just full of bugs and that was gross. So he had this perfectly logical reason for not wanting to eat eggs.
Yeah.
He just couldn't express it. So sometimes if we ask our kids, what is it you really don't like about this? They might have, a reasoning that makes sense to them about a certain color or a certain association that we can help them work through as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is there any logic to this, and is there truth to this, and is this part of the strategy? If you raise kids on vegetables, they gravitate to vegetables later in life, right? Maybe because of the microbiome, right? I mean, it changes the microbiome. Or are we born with a set of genetics that determine what we like and what we don't like?
Most of it is really what we're fed. And some of it can even go back to what mom was eating while we were in the womb, because having exposures to these different, all food breaks down into chemicals. And so we have exposures to quote unquote flavors that way as well. And then as foods are introduced, as we're giving kids all natural foods, they're opening up their palate naturally. But in our culture, we tend to introduce refined grains, artificial colorings and flavorings and things to kids pretty early. And that gives a different chemical signal. And that's where we'll latch onto, especially that, the fat, sugar, salt kind of thing, where we get really triggered and it promotes us overeating and wanting those type of foods, where we just want that hit of dopamine that we're getting from that food, rather than recognizing what our body truly needs. And so if we're raised with, real foods, we're more in tune with our body's needs, and that's what we'll go off of. But there is a little genetics at play in people who are super tasters, is the term for it, where they genetically taste things bitter more strongly. They have more taste receptors for bitter than the average person. And so that is something that you'll recognize as a real, extreme example that will run through families where we really don't like the greens. Often, aversion to things like coffee that most people do enjoy. And that can be its own, special category. But that's not most kids. Most kids are carbohydrate addicts, and that's why they don't like veggies.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, if you're feeding your kids sugar at a young age, or all the box foods that have the excitotoxins in them, I mean, these are drugs to the brain. I mean, the brain is going to not want broccoli when it can get these very neurologically excitatory foods. I mean, it does work. It's not a perfect analogy, but it does work the same as drugs.
Right. And this is something that as adults, we often can recognize in ourselves after we've cleaned up some of our own diet, or we've done on some type of sugar cleanse. And then, you go off of that and you have a candy bar, or you have a piece of cake, something really sweet, and you notice yourself buzzing and amped up. And in my own process of moving away from sugar addiction, I really realized how much I loved that high. I loved that energy because I was a low energy person running on, the carbohydrate up and down constantly. So it was my upper.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I've seen it. Look, we have one picky eater. Actually, it's funny. My son Isaac, my middle child, he was picky. He wouldn't eat a vegetable growing up. And I think a lot of it was in utero. He got inherited mom's lead, just like my first child, but it affected them differently. Isaac became very picky, but he's less picky now, as an 18-year-old. Now, my son Simon, he's our last one. He's our youngest. We were just kind of hands off with him, right? We were very strict with our diet with all the kids, right? Matter of fact, you should hear the jokes in the house, by the way. Oh my gosh, you wouldn't even let us, God forbid we had a piece of candy wrapper in our thing, you'd track us down, right? I mean, so that was like the ongoing joke. And then our youngest came and it was like, I'll figure it out. It's like typical youngest.
Typical youngest.
So he was the kid who ate everything. Honestly, we were like, well, don't worry about him. He eats healthy, he eats everything. If you say, try okra, he'd be like, okay, and he'd eat it. Now we let the hands off. He got sucked into carbohydrates because he had a bike and he could ride to the end of the street to the convenience store. Of course, he got addicted, right? We watched it happen, and he became overweight. Our only child to become overweight. He's not anymore. If you saw him at 15, he's slim and he looks completely different. But he had to figure it out himself and bring it back around. But he's still now, because of it, he became the picky eater. So it was his binge, if you will, that made him now picky. So even though he eats good now, to get a vegetable in him is impossible. So what are some of the strategies? I know that's what people want to hear. People, okay, how do I get my picky eater from mac and cheese to veggies? That's the title of the book.
Yeah. And it can kind of depend on the ages of kids and what you're dealing with and why you need to make the change and how dramatic that change needs to be. So for teenagers, to me, it's really like you're talking about with Simon, getting them connected to why they want to make the change. What is their motivation? Are they uncomfortable about their weight? Are they having mood swings or social anxiety or skin issues? That was my thing.
Skin was a big one. So at least two of my teenagers, because they were raised on the healthy diet, my older ones, right? They went out, we said, oh, they'll figure it out. They went out, they got bad skin and some other symptoms, and they came back. And now all of my kids eat very, very healthy, but that's what happened to them.
Yeah. And that's such a common thing that is really embarrassing. So those are points where you can open up that discussion and try. And for me, it's all about, what are foods leaving you feeling? How are they, showing up in your symptoms? So when you're binging on this thing, did you break out? When let's try this for 2 weeks or a month, really, doing this particular eating plan or really getting this amount of veggies in and see what happens. See if that helps your skin clear to have cruciferous veggies and lots of sulfur to help you with your detoxification system, for example. So with older kids, it's really about kind of negotiating that and having these conversations that are open and curious rather than demanding and saying, this is the way it has to be. What you're providing at home is still typically the majority of their food. So you do have that level of, quote unquote, control in what's offered to them, but you want them to internalize how their choices are working for them and why they're making them, and just having that open dialogue so that they can really think through. Because like you saw with your kids, when they are, going off to college, they're out of your sight, they're going to make their own choices anyways. And are they going to be able to circle back and have the reasoning to do so?
Yeah. I found if they don't make the decision themselves, even as teenagers, they'll eat very little here if they don't like the food, right? If they're picky about it, and they'll go out and they'll find the other food that they're addicted to or that they want. So unless they make the choice themselves, which our kids eventually did, it's really hard. You can't just hold them back from it.
Yeah. And I think those of us who are really into healthy eating, we find that in our social circles with all different ages of people, because we want so bad for them to eat real foods and understand these things. So it's not always just the kids, but it can be spouses, it can be other family members that we want to bring around to our way of thinking, but really it's finding out what motivates them and having them make their own choices, because
I sent them, I would send my kids some articles, and I would say, did you read that? My wife would send them articles too, right? Or different things, about, and even, say, let me tell you what this says, right? It's like, just kind of persuasive argument. All right, let's back up to little ones though, right? Because, that's what we see a lot. We're dealing with an autistic child who is, come on. It's even textures of foods, as you pointed out, can be a big deal, right? Colors of foods. You name it. Very big.
Foods touching each other.
Yeah,
all those
exactly.
things.
So what are some of the strategies here? Because it may be even more hard.
Yeah, and that's what I've worked a lot with kids with autism and sensory processing disorder. So that's where I really had to figure out so much of the strategy. And there's a few different ways to go. So as I talk about in the book, I use applied behavioral analysis, so ABA therapy, which is you're having a bite of this, or you're having this kind of food, and you're going to get some type of reward that you're very motivated by. And then we're going to increase how many bites for that same reward. And so that's a system that works well for some families that are already, using an ABA program for other reasons, or some kids are really motivated by their favorite thing, whether it be a certain play or activity or video or something like that. Other families will back into it, and that's where you can choose, one or two types of food that you want to just start working in the diet and be creative about it. Maybe your kids don't like boiled Brussels sprouts, but would they like them, shaved up and sauteed where they don't see it whole? Would it be okay if it had cheese on it, because then the taste was different, or another sauce like that? And you're just working in more foods that you're aiming for, and you're squeezing out the others. And then the most dramatic method is what I call the cold turkey method. And that's kind of when you're implementing a healing diet that's going to be therapeutic, and you choose a day, and this is the day where the food all changes. And that's that kind of ripping off the Band-Aid. These are the foods you're going to eat. If you don't want to eat these foods, you're not eating. You're not going to starve yourself to death. You're going to come around. We're going to keep offering you these foods, and you're going to choose which one you're going to eat.
That could be called the pet method, or the dog method, because when you change a dog's diet, right, to all raw, which is better for a dog, what happens is they don't eat.
Yes, my cat did that too.
And then the owner goes, oh, they didn't eat, and then they feed them the next day, and I tried that, it didn't work. How many days did you go without food? 1. Okay. Dogs can go many days without food. It's actually really good for them. We call that a fast. Eventually they will eat. Okay. So of course we can do that with children, but that's a little tougher with children.
It's emotional, and that's the toughest part. And so getting people mentally prepared, making sure that spouse is on board, or other people in the household are on board, to really stick it out and to have a goal and see the light at that end of the tunnel, instead of just the everyday stressors. Because when we do that method, your kids are going to refuse to eat at first. And I've had kids, not eat for 5 days. We keep them hydrated, and eventually they come around, and to be able to be with them and not be emotionally triggered by it is really important. So I talk about a lot of support.
Yeah, there's a certain mindset and trait. Like, I could do that, right? Because I know the value of fasting, right? I'd be like, it's good for him, right? He'll be fine. I'd even tell him every day, this is really good for you. But not every mindset is going to be that way. So is there a special mindset that goes with that personality?
I think some people are more, they lean more that way to begin with, but that's why mindset is one of the first chapters in my book, because I want whatever method you're choosing to be able to choose it, feel good about it, run with it. Because when you do that, the kid didn't eat all day, so I gave in at the end of the night, and then you're going to try to start over, then you're going to have twice as long without eating, because there is that battle of the will where the kid knows that, they felt sorry for me, took pity on me. And it may not be them being willful. Again, this is their microbe typically craving carbohydrates that are, screaming for their drugs that we're really going up against when we're in that period of fasting and we're in that period of transition. So there are some people who will will take that method and run with it, and it's easier for them. But there's other people who their situation is more desperate, that they need to do something therapeutic, and they've tried some of the other methods and they just really don't work, or they aren't working quick enough. If you have a child with an inflammatory bowel disease and you're having a lot of symptoms from that, and you're looking at, surgical procedures or, increasing drugs or something, that can be more motivating to say, okay, we're just going to build the resilience, follow the mindset steps, really talk with our family, really get ourselves psyched up to do this, to do it once, and to roll with it beyond that.
Right. So in the book, you said you start with mindset. Like, what does that mean? Meaning that, you said choose a mindset. You're telling the parents to choose a mindset, or what mindset are you?
So it's about developing a growth mindset and a resilient mindset, and to do things like getting support. In particular, I have a section on, talking to your spouse. Typically it's a mom that would initiate these type of changes. So often it's, dad needs to be on board, and not just like, yeah, that sounds good, you try that, but really on board. Because if there is an energetic disconnect between the parents, the child will sense that, and they'll hold out longer if, on not eating, if you're doing the cold turkey method, for example. Grandma needs to be in on that. And sometimes, I'll advise people, ask people for support, but you might need to leave out some people for a time who are not supportive. So looking at who you're discussing this with, because if you've really got this goal that's important to you, and other people think it's torture to not let your kids eat cupcakes at school, those are the people who, if you call them crying because you're struggling that day, they're going to tell you to give up. So you want to really look at who you're associating with, and, set things up so that you can be successful. That can even be things like choosing a restaurant that you can go to in a pinch, because life happens. Maybe you can't cook that day, but what is in your neighborhood that's organic or farm to table or paleo or whatever suits the dietary plan that you're going for, that you could get something close enough so that you're mentally prepared for that, so that nothing's going to turn you back from this plan that you've set.
Yeah. So you're helping them develop the mindset that they need for success. Let's back up to the very first strategy that you mentioned. And also the question is do you tell them where to start? I mean, do you give them like, okay, I would start here, or depending on the child, start here? So how does that look?
With the ABA strategy?
Yeah.
The applied behavioral analysis? Yeah, it's really start with, and my book isn't about a particular dietary plan. It's really whatever you want to implement. So you're choosing what food is most important, or what's a starter food for this plan that you're working in. And it's kind of step by step. Okay, give them a bite, give them the reward. Give them 2 bites.
What kind of award?
Give them a lot of praise. Preferably non-food rewards, but if that's all that would work, that would be fine. A good reward is something that your kid would do anything to get, that they're highly motivated by. So it could be a particular, game that they like to play. It could be something special to do with you. It could be a few minutes of a video, whatever is most important to them, because choosing the right reward is crucial, because they've got to be willing to do whatever it takes to get that reward.
So
and
do you
if
find
it won't
that
go along with it, it's not the right reward.
Right, exactly. So do you find then eventually they start not minding the food if you do that long enough, or is this something that's just you're always having to reward? Because that could be draining in itself.
Yes. And so for super picky eaters, part of it is getting the multiple tastes, allowing the brain to register, because even for a typically developing kid, it's 8 to 10 tries of something before they really know if they like it or not. So as you're introducing new bites, or you doing this over the course of time, they are starting to register what this food means to them and starting to recognize it. And so it can take a while to do this type of method. So, some people, especially if they're already working with an ABA type program, particularly with autism, then it can just be one more thing that they're working into ABA. And maybe they are really aiming to get some veggies in, or get some, meat in if kids are self-limiting on protein, to bring in a little bit more variety. And then the other thing that happens is as we start to bring in more foods, get more nourishment, that can unravel some of the toxicity that's within the brain, the signaling issues that they may have had with the taste of something. So there's this whole cascade of positive things that happen through both the tasting of it, but also just the nourishment and the rebuilding of health within the body.
Right. Yeah, admittedly, I didn't read the book because I don't have a picky kid. If I did, I'd be first on it. I'd be, I'd absorb it just like that because that's what I do. But for the parents out there, many that have picky eaters, or even people watching that says, gosh, I want to fix this in me. Kind of describe what the book takes us through. You said it starts with the mindset, but, other strategies that you feel you just want to, pull out of the book. Just for
So I talk about how you got a picky eater. So those kind of physiological reasons, in particular, the whole cascade of things that happen in a gut that has dysbiosis or imbalanced microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
And then we shift into mindset. Then we talk about choosing a method and getting prepared to make sure that when you start whatever method you choose, you're starting it, you're doing it once, and you're finding success. But then I also have sections on troubleshooting those first couple weeks. What happens if my kid vomits? What happens if my kid gets constipated? There's a lot of those things that are kind of expected, especially when you're making a major change.
Yeah, what's normal? Because if a parent sees a kid vomiting, they're going to be like, okay, that wasn't a good food for him, perhaps, right? Meanwhile, it was an action. Yeah.
Right. And so are they having low blood sugar? What to look out for with that? Are they having problems digesting fats, if that's what's causing nausea and vomiting?
And probably you give tips on what to do about it.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm very in-depth about those type of things. And then I also have a whole troubleshooting section as well, where we talk about things like bedwetting or eczema, diarrhea, all these little things that can crop up that you just need a go-to place to find out, what can I do to handle this? Is there something that I can adjust? Because I want parents to understand how to kind of be a detective as they're making these changes, and how that they can shift the foods and shift what they're doing with their kids so that it's really individualized to them. And then I also include a section, my kid won't, with a lot of different examples. So if you're doing something like the GAPS diet, or, a lot of therapeutic gut healing diets, you're doing broth. Your kid won't eat broth. Here are, multiple ways that you could work that in.
Right.
Here are ways you could, my kid will only eat ground meat. Well, what can we sneak into ground meat? My kid will only eat smoothies. How can we use smoothies to get more nutrition? So there's a whole bunch of ideas about that as well, to make it really practical. And there's throughout is a lot of encouragement as well. A lot of comments I've gotten on the book is that, oh, this is really authoritative, but it also makes you really feel like you're going to be able to do it. Like, there's some hard things, but it's not the big deal that it can seem like. And tons of other parents have done this, and you've got this. That's always my message to parents. Like, you've got this, take one step, evaluate where things are going. We just have to keep moving forward to make these changes, because if they're chronic and you're really seeing the health issues become apparent in your kids, it doesn't turn around on its own very readily.
Yeah, this is going to be a question. I'm sure you address it in the book. It's like, okay, we're now successful at home, but what do you do at school, right? Because there's peer pressure. There's this, you have the teacher, you have other kids giving them food. What do you do at school? I'll ask the question.
Yeah, and some of it depends. That's one of the other mindset things I talk about is, do you need to talk to your kids' teachers, and do you need to talk about the school environment? Should you be, what's appropriate for your situation? Should you be providing the, nut flour cupcake for birthday because everyone else is having one? And it really depends on, I'm not somebody who thinks you need to be 100% strict all the time, but you need to understand what are the outcomes or the consequences of the times that you're opening this up. So if your kid gets sugar, or for some of the kids I've worked with in particular, like your kid had gluten that day, parent calls me, their kid is a little nightmare. How long is this going to last? Like, if that happens and your kid's a little nightmare for 3 days, it's not worth it to, make that choice again. So these are some of the things that you're learning as you go along. But schools are often really tough because they are so sugar saturated and they're so food-based reward. And that's an ongoing issue. And it's really important for parents to be bringing this up and to talking to each other, because often there's a number of parents who feel the same way, but nobody kind of wants to go first about bringing it up, about, having this type of change. And the other thing to be sensitive to is that when you're suggesting change, people often take it very personal, even within your family. So being confident in why you're making the change for you and saying, this isn't really about you, this is just about us, and you do you, we're going to do us, but we want to be respectful of each other, can be helpful. Because when you make a change, people start examining some of their habits and getting angry with you.
It's
rather
remarkable.
than their own stuff around food.
Nobody likes people that step up and do something more harder or different. It's just an odd behavior, human behavior. I'm telling you, especially amongst those like women groups, man. It's like it's vicious. I mean, literally, it's remarkable. But this was a question that was posed to me not that long ago, just a couple weeks ago. Is okay. He's going to a birthday party. Which she really loves to, he's on the autism spectrum, and he really is, she's trying to get him more socially interactive. So birthday party going to, very good thing. Friends are really important. However, they're going to have these foods that he's not going to eat. What should I do, Dr. Pompa? Oh God, I wish I had you in my back pocket at that moment.
I have a blog post specifically about that.
Yeah, we'll share that here in 1 second, right? That's a great idea, actually. So my advice was look, I would first of all call the mother who's having the party and say, here's my challenge, right? So recommendation, should I send him after the cake and cookies, right? And he wouldn't even know it happened, maybe. Or if the kids say, oh, you missed, mom could just, hey, we're late, sorry. Or maybe, it's a special thing that you could bring for her, ahead of time, but then he might see that his is different. That may not go over well. So I think I landed on, I would have her see if she can just do it before somehow, and he comes late. That was all I could think of. Did I miss something? Is there something better? What would you recommend?
Yeah, those are the suggestions that I make as well. And talking to the parent up front, and when you're bringing something different for your child, talking to them about that, something, particularly if they're not eating a lot of sugar, then having one of their favorite treats could be really exciting. And you can say, they're going to be serving this kind of thing, and that doesn't feel good on your tummy, or that really affects your sleep, if whatever way you can connect with them on that. But what would it be really exciting if we could have this almond flour cupcake, or if we could have this lemon bar, something that would be fun for them to substitute in, so that they still feel like they're participating in something special, but they have their own version of that. And then some people do arrive late, leave early, kind of miss out on that, and just participate in the other activities.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, almond flour, stevia sweetened, homemade treats are a lifesaver, in these cases for sure. There's no doubt. Okay, where can people, you mentioned your blog, where do they find that to get questions answered? And what about your book?
Yeah, so my website is bodywisdomnutrition.com. And I have a tab right on there that's for parents that talks about the book, and also has a freebie and has some blog listings as well. And my book is called From Mac and Cheese to Veggies, Please: How to End Picky Eating Forever and Stay Sane in the Process. And it's available on Amazon, and it is also available locally if you're in the Portland area where I live, at Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, that's good. All right, perfect. And all right, one last question. So a parent wants to start tonight. What do they do?
Well, there's different strategies you can do. I would say if you're choosing one food, try it a new way. Often we've introduced, especially vegetables, to our kids a certain way that we're used to making it, or it's come in a certain mixture. But if you want to try that again, try it a different way. Look something up on, Pinterest to find a new recipe, to find a new preparation. And another thing that really gets kids involved is having them choose something new at the market that they're willing to try, and having them help with prepping the food,
that's smart.
because they get a buy-in and an ownership about, you know, and they're more willing to try something that they graded or that they mixed together, that they participated in making.
Great advice. Well, Jen, thank you for being here. I hope my clients with picky eaters are listening. I'm going to make them listen. This is what I say, okay, episode, and I give them the episode. She knows more about this than I do. She has more ideas than I do. So thanks for your book. Thanks for being on Cellular Healing TV, and great knowledge that you brought. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Well, that's it for this week. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. This episode was brought to you by CytoDetox. Please check it out at buycytonow.com. We'll be back next week and every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. We truly appreciate your support. You can always find us at podcast.drpompa.com. And please remember to spread the love by liking, subscribing, giving an iTunes review, and sharing the show with anyone you think may benefit from the information heard here. And as always, thanks for listening.